March 4th, 1980, I was finishing a graveyard shift working patrol. My partner and I, we were about to get off and we got a call of a possible body down at Rat Beach. It was a beach accessible through Malaga Cove. You get the call of a possible body on the beach. Right away, you start thinking, okay, we have a drunk, we have somebody that stumbled and fell, might have an injured person. I wasn't prepared for what we found.
This was an unsolved homicide case, a complete whodunit, complete mystery with zero witnesses. 33 years later, I was assigned the case.
You have to wonder what the person who did it has been up to for the last 33 years. And you don't know what else they've gotten away with.
The LA County Sheriff's Department is the best of the best.
Some of the highest profile cases are tried in Los Angeles.
You have to be dedicated 110%.
This is murder. There's no more serious crime.
It boils down to a passion and a sense of duty.
Justice comes from finding the truth. In 2013, I went to my team lieutenant and said, hey, I would like to catch some cases. So he had on his desk, sitting there, was a case from 1980. I was hooked just reading through the reports on this case. Anytime a female is victimized, right, I think of my daughters. I start reading through the reports, thinking, wow, okay, this is gonna take me a lot of different places. Because I gotta find all these people in the original reports. And I find David Byington, the first responder. We talk on the phone, and what a great memory he had of this case. He remembered this case because back in 1980, he was a rookie on the department.
In 1980, I'm a police officer for the city of Palos Verdes Estates. Palos Verdes Estates is a little suburb south of Los Angeles. Beautiful cliffs, mansions, high-income folks live there. Most houses there go well into the multi-millions, even back in the 70s. As far as murders in Palos Verdes Estates, they were rare, if ever. At the time, I was 21 years of age. I had been actually on my own for only a month or two in patrol. So when I responded to the scene and realized that we actually had a potential homicide, I definitely started shaking.
There was a female found dead on the beach at Palos Verdes Estates on Malaga Cove. And she apparently had been sexually assaulted and she had been beaten about the head.
A surfer had found her purse, which had her identification in it. We were able to learn right away that she was Teresa Boudreau from Wilmington, just 12 miles away, and she was only 20 years old.
We tried to check for signs of life, and I remember I had initially tried. The body was warm to the touch, but I could not tell if I was getting a pulse or if I was feeling my own pulse. I think part of that was nerves. I could see that the young lady was completely nude except for a pair of knee-high socks. She appeared to be posed in some position where her feet were facing the ocean. She had a large amount of blood covering her face. Her hair was matted down in the blood, so it was difficult to see her face completely without moving the hair. She had what appeared to be a laceration on her forehead, as well as some bruising and fresh injuries on her abdomen. Ultimately, the beach is a crime scene. The tide was coming in so quickly, we had to pick her up physically and move her away. As we did this, my partner was trying to support her head. As we moved up the beach, my partner told me, oh no, my hand just disappeared in her head. She's got a large wound to the back of her head. We knew that this was not an accident. Miss Boudreau was my first homicide victim. It's the ultimate crime, the taking of another human life, and the last thing you want to do is mess that up. The Palos Verdes Estates Police Department is a smaller agency. The sheer magnitude of this crime mandated that we would reach out to an agency that could adequately handle a murder investigation. In the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, they were known to be the best. When the Los Angeles Sheriff's Homicide Unit showed up, I was taking note of everything that they did.
Any prosecutor will tell you our job isn't just to convict people, it's also to make sure that the procedure that you go through to investigate a case is done correctly. You're left having to turn to surveillance cameras or witnesses or scientific evidence. And in 1980, you didn't have anywhere near as much of, or as many of those things as you do now.
The victim had no clothing recovered anywhere in the scene. We found a bottle of alcohol and a couple glasses. One of them still had appeared some alcohol in it, near where this purse had been apparently dumped. That would lead me to believe at that time that there was obviously someone else there that was drinking with the victim prior to the murder. We also saw there were tire tracks.
They believed firmly that this was tire tracks from the suspect's vehicle, but the tire was somewhat balding. The tread depth was not deep enough, so they couldn't cast the tracks.
The LA County Sheriff's homicide detectives immediately hit the ground running, trying to contact family members, people closest to your victim, and find out anything that could lead you to a potential suspect that you could start following those leads. And they determined that she was, in fact, married to a gentleman named Ronnie Femont.
When I met Teresa, she was maybe 18, 19. I was about 20. Me and my friend were on the east side of Wilmington, just, hanging out or whatever. And one of the girls brought Teresa. And when I saw her, I just, wow. She was very independent, very strong-willed. I don't know what she saw in me. Me and my friends, we started doing drugs, dabbling in it. But when me and Terry got together, she gave me an ultimatum. Say, hey, buddy, you gotta stop. It was a no-brainer. 2.5 years worked together. And then I thought, this is a girl I want to marry. I wanted her to have a family, I want to settle down. So I did. I married her. Then she got pregnant shortly after. And they said, it's going to be a girl. So I was elated.
The manner in which Teresa was killed was extremely upsetting. It was a violent death with her head bashed in and likely sexually assaulted. And to then find out that she was several months pregnant. And there was yet another life that was also derailed and ended is incredibly sad. On top of that tragedy, she actually already was a mom. She had a 4-year-old daughter named Linda.
March 4th, 1980 was one of the worst days of my life. My grandmother told me my mother drowned at the beach. And that she was going to heaven with the angels. And she wasn't gonna come back. I became too much to handle. I didn't want to be with my aunt. I didn't want to be with my grandmother. I didn't want to be with my dad. I just wanted my mom. And I couldn't understand why she couldn't come back. I felt like the only person that ever loved and protected me was gone. And now there was nobody left to love me.
When I first met Linda, she was probably 2 years old. She was still baby talk, you know. She wasn't too vocal. Cute as a bug, you know, she really was. Being that she wasn't mine, it didn't bother me. Didn't bother me one bit. We used to play cafe. She would come and take my order and then go to the kitchen, act like she made me food. She was a good kid.
I just used to love it because I used to make the menu with Ronnie, and I used to take it to my mom, and she was like, "How many do you want, ma'am?" And I would be like, 2, please. And she'll just be making my little grilled cheese by candlelight. I don't know why. I don't know why it's candlelight, but yeah.
Ronnie married this woman, allegedly loved her, was raising her daughter as his own, but that doesn't exclude him from being a suspect. He could have snapped, had a bad moment, bad week, who knows? Ronnie was one of the first people that the sheriff's homicide detective spoke to.
The sheriffs, they interrogated me, and I answered everything. On March 3rd, I was attending Harbor College, not taking anything special. I was doing art, because I was real good with art. I came home and said to my wife, "Come on, let's go to my friends, let's go to George's house." We used to hang out in the garage, you know, drink and smoke. We went. She didn't participate. She was pregnant. She didn't want to stand up all night in the garage, so I understand she wanted to go home. We went home, and I told her, "I'm gonna go back." She goes, "No, I don't want you to go back. You can't go back." I go, "I'm gonna go back." "No, you better not go." I go, "Terry, I'm going back." That's when I went out the door. I went this way toward my friend's house. I heard the door slam, and I turned back. She was going out toward the alley. We had a gate in the alley that would take you to the other street. That's where her sister lived, right down the block. So I go, she's mad. She'll go to her sister's and complain and talk shit about me. She'll be okay. But then I never seen her again.
How many times does a wife disappear and the husband says, you know, she left, I don't know what happened to her. And 9 times out of 10, that's bullshit. It's gonna be the husband.
They asked to take my shirt off. They're looking for scratches or, you know, defensive wounds. And I had nothing. So they kept asking me, "You didn't do it, did you?" I go, "No, I didn't do it."
When they interviewed Ronnie, he was concerned, he was nervous. When your wife is found murdered, either you're gonna be devastated, in shock, etc., or you're gonna be terrified they're gonna figure out you're the one who did it.
After I left the sheriff's, I went back to my house, and there's cop cars stationed around the block. They're looking at my house.
Very quickly, he became concerned that he was the suspect, and he was.
I called my uncle, Henry Salcido, criminal lawyer. And my uncle just told me, don't talk to him, avoid him. So that's what I did.
My father was absent. So when my mom got married to Ronnie, and I found out I was gonna have a sibling, I immediately thought we were gonna have a full and complete family now with Ronnie, the new baby, my mom, and I. So I was super excited, so excited. But when everything happened with my mother, I did not stay with Ronnie. My dad's family came and got me right away.
I really missed her when they took her. It destroyed me.
During the course of the autopsy, essentially a rape kit was taken, but a rape kit back in 1980 is nothing like it is today. So there were clippings taken from her fingernails because it appeared that there was material underneath her fingernails, and they could potentially compare that to blood type. There was also swabs that were taken which were not testing for DNA, but could test for the presence of sperm.
They brought her to the mortuary. I went back there and asked to see her because I had to make arrangements. They pulled back the thing. They only got the sheet like halfway, and I already just, my knees buckled. I just couldn't believe what I saw. As far as her features, there was none. It was just total darkness, a big hole for a face. And right away, I told the people, I want this casket closed, and I want the baby swaddled and put in her arms, so they're together for eternity.
The investigators spoke with a lot of friends, a lot of family, and that's really all they had to go on.
They learned that the last person to see Teresa was her sister. She gets to her sister's house. Her sister wanted her to stay there, and she didn't.
Teresa Boudreau left her sister's house in the middle of the night and started walking down the street.
There was a cousin who remembers that day of, before she was found dead, she wanted to go out to the beach.
Neither Teresa nor Ronnie had a car. It wouldn't be unreasonable that she would hitchhike to go get to the beach. So they were really at the mercy of anybody seeing anything, and it happened at night, and she was discovered early morning, and so there were no witnesses that ever came forward. There wasn't a whole lot of investigative tools that could be used to figure out who her killer was.
They were looking at Ronnie, Teresa Boudreau's husband, as a potential suspect. After a thorough investigation, they were able to determine that Ronnie had an alibi. Ronnie had been in a friend's garage with several eyewitnesses on the night that his wife had been murdered. And that basically cleared him from the murder of his wife. And even though the police or investigators might exclude Ronnie, you can't unring that bell with family members and loved ones, that thought and belief that he was responsible for their daughter, their mother, their sister's death.
When I was about 8 or 9 years old, my cousin and I were going through her mother's boxes or her drawers, and we found the autopsy of my mother. And I'm like, what? They said she drowned, and I'm still, in that mode where they said she drowned. And I'm like, oh, this happened to her? Everyone in her family was saying, Ronnie's the one that killed my mother. I believed it right away because they used to fight a lot. And I was there to see all of that. I was right there, watching every single day.
They made their choice that I wasn't a suspect, sheriffs did. But they had nobody else. So everybody thought I did it. Couldn't explain how many times I got shot at, because people thought I did it. Whether it be her family or friends, I don't know. Nobody ever shot at me before until after her death. I was so traumatized, I didn't want to live.
If your wife disappears in the middle of an argument and we don't have any evidence pointing to somebody else who did it, and what you have is an alibi by people that you are close to, either that's a legitimate alibi or it's not. But you have no other suspects. We didn't have an eyewitness. We didn't really have any evidence at the time that could be used. There wasn't anything else they could do.
Ultimately, the Teresa Boudreau murder was never solved. It was put on the backbench as a cold case for decades.
When I was little, I used to cry for my mom. And I would ask questions over the years. There was just so many questions I had that no one was willing to answer. No one wanted to talk about her. No one wanted to talk about what happened. No one told me anything. They'll tell me to be quiet. She's not gonna come back. I kind of got used to not having any parents. The void from my mother has never been filled. I don't think it'll ever be filled.
I went through years of people pointing and avoiding me or talking behind my back. I didn't really deal with it. I didn't think about my daughter, I didn't think about Terry. I'd work just to get high, so I didn't have to deal with all the pressure of people still walking around telling me, hey, that's him. He killed his wife.
As I got older, I used to see him sometimes walking around. I did not want to talk to Ronnie. I didn't know what to feel, you know? I was like, did he really? Could he have really? You know, I started questioning people because they were the ones telling me, you know. I seen them fighting a lot, but could he really kill her?
When I got the case, the cultural background, there was a connection there. In the 80s, culture in Wilmington was very much the same as culture in East LA. The area I grew up in, it was predominantly Hispanic, lowrider culture, gangs, crime. Seeing sometimes how my parents were afraid. They're afraid to call the police. 1980, I'm 13 years old, I'm in the 8th grade. If you would have told me that I was gonna get involved in a homicide investigation that happened in Palos Verdes Estates, which was a world away from East LA, I would have told you you were nuts. I never was a kid who said, I want to be a cop. That was the last thing I thought I'd ever be. The passion really came once I started the job and started to notice the difference that you could make.
Ralph was more of a subdued, subtle kind of approach. He challenged himself and made a name for himself. Ralph never wanted to promote. He wanted to be a damn good detective.
People always ask me, what is this job like working homicide? It's like juggling balls in the ocean. You don't want to drown, but you don't want to drop the ball.
When you look at a cold case, there are so many different things that you have to overcome. Investigations change after 10, 15, 20 years. Different techniques evolve. Different thought processes evolved.
Ultimately, you have to do a little gumshoe detective work, right? You got to go out and find people, find witnesses. But technology is a tremendous, tremendous asset for us now on these unsolved cases.
In this case, in 1980, that was years before DNA. There's different investigative avenues that can be explored. Now we can go back and we can take that evidence and we can develop DNA profiles.
There were several items of evidence that had been kept from the scene. We knew that there were enough there that there were things we could potentially test. The sheriff's department had a criminalist who was excellent. As the criminalist is working on this evidence and trying to determine if there's enough genetic material, what we're realizing is she has very little to work with. The fingernails turned out not to be as helpful as we were hoping they would be. The other evidence that was at the scene also was not as helpful. There were no prints or DNA on the bottle of alcohol. Only Teresa's fingerprint was on the cup. And contrary to what you see on CSI, the TV shows, unfortunately people don't sprinkle their DNA everywhere at whatever crime scene they go to. So we had to pivot. We had to think of a different way to try to identify her killer. And that's when we turned to the coroner's evidence. The coroner's office was able to obtain the DNA found on the victim. The criminalist took the pubic hair combings and basically washed them. And from that washing, she's able to put it into a centrifuge that spins and essentially churns out a pellet. And from that pellet, she's able to look at it microscopically and determine if there's any genetic material in the pellet. And she found one sperm head. And so that's what she was able to end up testing for DNA.
The goal there is that they would be able to develop an actual DNA profile, because sometimes you can have bodily fluid, but that doesn't mean you're going to have enough to come up with a complete DNA profile. Sometimes you have a partial profile, sometimes you get nothing.
If there's not sufficient evidence there, it's a dead end.
Detective Ralph Hernandez got my case and gave me a call. I felt at ease that he understood me. He knew my style of life, what I've been through. You know, the addiction, the gangs, the everything. Because being from East LA, you're familiar with that stuff. Being a cop, you're more familiar. You probably see it more than I see it. He treated me just like he would anybody. Wasn't because I was Chicano. He treated me because I was human. So I talked to him and I let him know I have some more information.
Ronnie tells us the story about how this female acquaintance from the neighborhood approached him one evening and said, "Hey, I feel bad. I held on to this for a few years. I want you to know about this."
In the late 90s, I was still spiraling out of control. And I was in a bar. One of my friends walked in, who I hadn't seen in quite a while. She came up to me. "Ronnie, I know who killed your wife."
People's lives continue on, and they remember vivid details of what traumatically happened to them in the past. They realize, you know what, this has caught up to me and I need to tell somebody.
When I met Detective Ralph Hernandez, I had been sober a while. For so long, I've been feeling so bad about this. And I thought it was time I could handle some answers.
She was my homeboy's old lady. She'd been gone for so long, I wondered what had happened to her. I didn't know, because I didn't keep tabs on her. We started talking, she started crying. She goes, "I know who killed her." And then I just like, "Wow, what do you mean?"
She said I was abducted by two guys and sexually tortured. These guys picked her up. They told her, "Put some of this on your tongue." She said immediately when she put that liquid on her tongue, she went numb.
She said she could hear and see, but couldn't move. She like paralyzed.
Tortured her, sexually abused her. And then she told me that she heard him say, "What are we gonna do with her body?" They go, "We'll take her where we dump Terry." But she jumped out the window of the car while it was moving. And a passerby stopped and helped, and they took off. The person she mentioned, I knew him well, knew some of his characteristics. It fit.
Now it's secondhand information, right? This girl's told Ronnie, Ronnie's telling us, we need to find this girl. I had some addresses that were listed in the original reports of people who lived in the neighborhood. So I knocked on a few doors. I find out that she's living out of state. I come up with a phone number and we start talking, and she was very, very cooperative and willing to meet with us, which is huge. We fly out to her.
Ralph actually went to Texas to go talk to her. That right there, at that moment, let me know, oh, this guy's gonna do whatever it takes. And I felt really good about this. I definitely felt that after 33 years, I finally had somebody in my corner.
We had just flown in, and I get a phone call from the crime lab. And the crime lab's telling me, hey, we got a hit in CODIS for your evidence for DNA from your scene. That was incredible. But it was a little confusing because it wasn't the person that we thought that we were being steered toward from the information we were going to get from our informant. It was a completely different person.
Thanks to the criminalist, we now had a name. It came back as a match to a man named Robert Inigas. Who was Robert Inigas? Where did he come from? What did he do? Where was he? Where was he 34 years ago?
Robert Inigas. He was nowhere in the file. He was nobody who had been interviewed. He was no one whose name had even been mentioned. And there were a ton of names in those original reports, and his was not one of them. But it was very exciting. So we get back from our out-of-state trip and our interview with the informant, which turned out to be a dead end. We quickly begin to conduct a background investigation on Robert Inigas. And I also pulled crime reports from his previous arrests. And in 1981, Robert Inigas was arrested for rape.
The victim in that case had been a hitchhiker that he picked up, and he proceeded to rape her. That victim reports it. He gets arrested immediately after that rape.
He was charged in court. He was held to answer on preliminary hearing. The victim actually came to testify. And sometime before the trial, it became difficult to find the victim, and the case was dismissed, and he was let go. Then fast forward to 1982, he was arrested for another rape in which he was actually convicted, and he went to prison. And that conviction is what actually brought his DNA into the CODIS database.
Because the CODIS hit is only an investigative tool and lead, we're ethically required to go get what's called a confirmatory sample. We needed to try to get a DNA sample from him in order to confirm and run it against the evidence that was found from the coroner's kit. So our next step had to be locating Mr. Inigas.
Detective Ralph Hernandez asked me if I knew who this Robert Inigas guy was. And I said no, but I was very hopeful. The DNA always catches a bad guy. And now there was DNA. Now they just have to find the guy.
Sex offenders are required to register on their birthday. With Mr. Inigas, his birthday was about 4 months away from when Detective Hernandez learned that he was a potential suspect. So the easiest place to find Mr. Inigas was going to be when he went to register.
Inigas is at Harbor Station getting ready to register as a sex offender. At that point, I want to find out more about him. We wanted to confirm where he had lived, where he had been, who his family was, who his friends were, because maybe there is some connection to Teresa. Also, I want to obtain a sample of his DNA. And so I told him who we were, where we were from, and he was willing to talk to us. You went to prison in 80, or was it?
It was 80.
Before you went to prison, where were you living?
I believe I was living in Wilmington at my my stepmom's house with my dad. I didn't know too many people from Wilmington. I mean, I was cruise around there, but I didn't really know anybody over there.
I actually didn't really have a big game plan. My first thought was just be yourself. Talk to him, put him at ease, and it just kind of evolved from there. Did you ever used to go partying at the beach?
No.
Never. Never used to go out there?
No.
And you've never been to Malaga Cove, Palos Verdes Estates?
Ralph's approach was to be very non-confrontational. So he tries to get Inigas to be comfortable, and then he tries to go through the information that he has and to see if he can lock him in to a certain story.
Tell me about that case when you got arrested.
took her to Redondo, and we had sex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she refused, but then after that she gave in, and
they charged you with rape.
Yeah.
Right. You got off because she didn't show up.
Mhm.
Okay. Does Teresa ring a bell to you?
No.
No. Nothing at all. There were times that I could see it in his chest, kind of the heavy breathing. People describe they see people pounding their heart rate or their hearts beating through their shirt. You could see kind of the deep breaths, and he was obviously nervous. Let me show you some pictures. You know that girl right there? Or remember her at all?
No.
No?
Mm-mm.
This lady was found dead on the beach. You sure she's nobody that looks familiar to you? Teresa Boudreau.
No.
And this is 1980, March of 1980.
No, not at all.
The denials were so important because we had such powerful DNA evidence. If he came to us and said, hey, look, I dated Teresa behind her husband's back, I had sex with her that night, it would have complicated our case.
No.
That's why the denial was so much more powerful. Would there be any reason for your DNA to be at the scene?
No, it shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be?
Yeah.
We're here. We know you can help us because your DNA was at the scene.
I don't know. I can't see how. I don't even know that girl.
If you really want to have a good rapport with your suspect, you got to give him something. And I had information for him, and he needed to know that information. And it might stimulate something for him to say something to help us get to the truth, right? Because, hey, what if he had a plausible explanation? What if he didn't do it, right? So 100% you're not going to have any issues with your DNA there. And so then you'd be willing to give us a sample of your oral swabs?
Okay.
And so I appreciate that. I came away from that interview with Iniguez firmly believing that we had our guy. But it was more important at that point to build a case and to know for sure, okay, this is our guy, and then go out and arrest him.
Getting a buccal swab of DNA from Mr. Iniguez allowed the Sheriff's Department to do confirmatory testing. He was, in fact, a match, and the match was proven through a statistic which was 1 in 82.5 trillion. And there's only 7 billion people on the planet. So to be 1 in 80-something trillion is quite a significant match.
In this case, it's very clear that he's your killer. So now it's a question of what can you do to make the case even better?
The rape case in 1981 was extremely important because Iniguez came upon a female who was in Wilmington at the bus stop and offered her a ride. We had the fact that Teresa was last seen in Wilmington, and there are potential similarities in the MO. And luckily, I was able to locate and interview the victim from the 1981 rape.
When I met the guy, I wasn't hitchhiking, I was just walking.
Right.
He pulled up in his car and asked me if I wanted to ride, and I said, yeah.
The circumstances she's telling us is similar to what we believe happened to Teresa.
How sure are you that this man forced you, raped you?
100%. I stopped resisting because he started threatening to kill me.
She was threatened. She gave in. Teresa was beaten and killed. I believe Teresa fought back, and Iniguez followed through with his threat. So that was extremely powerful and just tied our case that much more together.
Whenever I am looking at a cold case, I always want to sit down with the suspect, if I can. I want to myself evaluate them. I want to see how they respond to my questioning. I want to see if they're going to end up making things worse. What are they going to admit to? Where are my issues going to be? It's the only chance that I will ever have to have a conversation with them. Once the case is filed, I can't talk to them. Robert Iniguez told Ralph Hernandez that he had never met the victim, that he had never had sex with her, that he had never been to Palos Verdes Estates and Malaga Cove and that beach. The more adamant he was going to be in denying it, the better it was going to be for the case going forward, because I could prove that that just wasn't true.
John wanted to come with me to interview Robert Iniguez again. So we both went, we talked to him.
Hi, I wanted to talk, I need to talk to Robert, please.
Who are you?
My name's Ralph. He knows who I am. So this is John.
That second interview was not ideal. Part of it was his wife and his daughter were there, his family's there.
Come on in.
Thank you.
You guys look like you're gonna arrest him.
Oh God, no.
Okay.
We're gonna leave here. And I just was hoping for 10 minutes and maybe just a little bit of privacy, if that's okay
Why?
with you.
He ain't got nothing to hide from me.
I don't have nothing to hide.
Nothing.
Oh.
We tell each other everything.
Wanted to give him the respect of being able to talk to him, you know, without other people here, if that's what he wanted. But if this is how he's comfortable.
It was highly unlikely that he would have told his wife, who was not with him at the time of this, of the murder, hey, by the way, you realize I raped and murdered people prior to our relationship. So we wanted to do it in private. And no matter how much we suggested it, his position was no, we have no secrets, etc. So we had to do the interview in front of her.
Well, just hear me
I
out,
had
Robert.
nothing to do with
no,
that case.
But Robert, just hear me out.
He doesn't want to admit all of this in front of them. And really, when John began to press him in a little bit more detail about the incident, he starts to deny. He became very defensive.
And I'm going to stay with that story. I do not know her. I never seen her. I never met her.
John did, in fact, in the interview, accuse Iniguez of committing the murder.
You said you never met this girl at all.
No.
So what do you think of yours? What kind of DNA do you think we found?
Probably my sperm.
Yeah, so can you tell me how that could possibly be, Robert?
It should be. Because I don't even know her. I never met her. I never seen her.
Robert?
I had nothing to do with that.
We got your semen on the pubic hair of this dead woman.
Mm-hmm.
This dead woman was picked up near the same place where, within a year of that time, you picked up Lori. This woman had her head bashed.
Pressing him, it just led to more denials, but John got him to admit that he wouldn't believe his own denials. So it kind of came back full circle.
Would you agree that if your semen is inside of her, that means that you must have known her and had sex with her that night at the beach?
Yeah, that would be logical.
If you were sitting where I was sitting right now, would you believe what you're saying? You tell me.
I believe it.
Well, ma'am, I'm asking you, if you were sitting where I'm sitting right now, would you believe that story? You tell me.
No, I wouldn't believe that story.
I don't think 12 jurors are going to believe it either.
He had a look on his face of resignation that he knew where it was going.
I'll be goddamn if I'm going to go back to fucking prison for something I didn't do.
Okay, so listen. Your DNA.
I know what you're saying. My DNA is on her. But I don't know. Are we done? Because this is starting to piss me off.
Yeah, I'm going to get a
now.
lawyer. We're going to get a lawyer.
Listen.
Are we finished?
We're finished. Robert,
we're done.
Listen to me.
There's nothing more to say.
Well, if you tell me that you want us to leave, we'll leave. I want.
Yeah.
Ma'am, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to him.
I want you to leave.
Okay. All right. That's your option.
We were confident at that point. We had enough. We had the DNA. We had Iniguez's denials. We have some of his admissions. We got him. September of 2017, we finally make our move. We have a surveillance team follow Iniguez away from his home. We get a black and white to make a stop, and they place him under arrest for murder. He didn't say much to us, but it didn't matter at that point. We had quite a bit of evidence and quite a bit of information to present. I still remember walking out and calling Ronnie.
The phone rings and I see that it says Detective Ralph. Oh shit, it's too early. I get nervous and my feet start tapping. I answer it. He goes, Ronnie. I go, hey Ralph, what's up? He goes, are you sitting down? And right then my heart went boom.
I tell him, we got him. We're charging him.
I just cried, sat in my car and cried 45 minutes.
It was a very emotional phone call for us.
I get a phone call saying, in 1 hour, we're gonna do a press conference. They found the person that killed your mother. And I just started crying. And I couldn't believe it. They were like, we need you to be in downtown LA right now. I couldn't make it there. But my stepdad was there, of course. He was there for everything.
The press conference really was for Ronnie to be able to tell the story to the press and to let them know what he had been through.
Detective.
The day of the press conference, you could see me in the back. I'm sort of edgy. I was sweating and I was starting to look like Rudy Giuliani up there.
At this point, we wanted to introduce Ronnie Femont, who was married at that time to Teresa Boudreau.
Hello. It's been 37 years, longer than 37 years, and been waiting a long time for this day. I want to thank my family for always believing in me, always being by my side, and I want to thank these people here. Because without them, I wouldn't be here today. Been a long time for what I've been through. And the uncertainty of not knowing why or how, you know. And I'm just glad this day came. Thank you very much. Now everybody knows it wasn't me. They took the burden off me. Now people knew the truth.
It was important for me, for Ronnie, to have that.
Once they told me that it wasn't him and that this other guy did it, and I was like, oh my goodness. We did try to build a relationship, but yeah, things don't always work out.
On October 2nd, 2017, I filed the complaint against Robert Iniguez. The first count was murder, and the second count was rape. Based on the circumstances and the law and the evidence at the time, we weren't able to file a charge for the baby. Before we could pick a jury and try the case, the defendant, through his attorney, indicated that he wanted to enter a plea agreement. He was willing to plead to second-degree murder, which carries a sentence of 15 to life, and admit that he had, in fact, killed Teresa.
My feeling is that he probably did not want his wife and his stepdaughter to hear all of the details of the crime. So if you're in his position and you're going to get convicted either way, then you maybe choose an option where you can maintain your innocence, you know, in your private conversations with them.
Iniguez was sentenced in October of 2019.
Talking 37 and a half years, 40 to the day he got convicted. And I lived with torment every day.
Had the defendant been convicted at trial, there would have been a mandatory sentence of life without parole as the minimum. With a plea and pleading to 15 to life, he will be eligible for parole. But because you never know what's going to happen with a jury, it's a risk.
I figured at his age, 15 to life, he ain't getting out. And I get to sleep at night knowing he's not gonna be around to hurt anybody else.
I was very relieved when it was all over with. It was very overwhelming for me. Now I can start healing.
I made arrangements to have a flower shop close by Malaga Cove to make her a real nice wreath and a cross. I picked it up, everybody we caravan all the way over there.
We're there with the family and they're putting up this wreath and on the banner says it's over. It was a weird feeling to be there. I'd been there a couple of times, but now we had Iniguez convicted, we had answers.
Ralph Hernandez, he did me right. He did me justice. He gave me everything I needed to put this behind me. I can't thank him enough for the hard work he did. He's a Chicano done good. I go, that's you, Ralph. You should be proud of yourself.
I'm very proud. It felt great to be able to get answers for the family. It was very satisfying because you realize the fruit of your hard labor, all those hours, all those years, you made a difference.
On the edge of the Mediterranean, Monaco, the most famous rock in the world. This principality of 2 square kilometers is the village of the largest fortunes on the planet. Monaco is a bit of the fief of luxury, of the voluptuousness, of the rhinestones, of the glitter. Here we find a bit of the whole world jet set. It is not uncommon to see racing cars, such as Ferraris, Maseratis, and others. Monaco is an area at the end of France. There is the most expensive square meter in the world, and of course we only meet billionaires. Among these billionaires, an illustrious family, almost as famous as the Prince family. The Pasteurs. A legend on the rock for more than a century. The epic of the Pasteurs family begins with the installation of Jean-Baptiste Pasteurs, who was a young Italian immigrant, stone carver, who came to the rock to work on the construction sites. It is a rather extraordinary story. It is the story of a Freemason who will deploy considerable talents. About 10 years after his arrival, he founded a construction company, and it will make his fortune. The one called the Little Freemason builds a flourishing construction company. But it is his son, in the 1950s, who makes society prosper and founds an empire. His son will eventually become the owner of 1/10 of the building of Monaco, which is extraordinary. It is in fact one of the first fortunes of Monte Carlo, and of France, of course. It is the most prominent family in Monaco. Today, the Pasteurs family owns 15% of the real estate of Monaco, which is about 4,000 apartments. A wealth estimated at 30 billion euros. In 2014, this huge empire is run by Helene Pasteurs, 77 years old, the founder's granddaughter. Helene has 2 children from 2 different families, a daughter named Sylvia, a son named Gilles Del Pasteur. Her job is to manage the rental of the apartments, but she is obviously well beyond a real estate agency. She owns 1,200 apartments on the Rocher. She receives her tenants, she reads their emails, she listens to their complaints, so she really wants to manage her business with a master's hand. Helene is a businesswoman excessively rich and influential. But this year, she is struck by a tragic event. Her son, Gillis Del Pastor, 40 years old, is a victim of a stroke and he is hospitalized in Nice. Struck by this tragedy, Helene Pastors regularly visits him. She left every day with her driver at 4 o'clock in Monaco. Catherine Messonneau, head of the repression brigade of the banditry of Nice. She always took the same path. She arrived at the hospital at 5 o'clock to see her son. Helene Pastors regularly came to the Larcher Hospital. At the behest of Gillis Del Pastor, her son, who is in a very worrying state. He is in the middle of re-education. She went there from Monday to Thursday because on Friday, Gillis Del Pastor came home for the weekend because he had no care. This well-organized daily life has been going on for 3 months already. But it will abruptly stop on May 6, 2014. That day, it is 7 p.m. when the phone rings at the Nice police station. A call for Commissioner Frisson, 30 years of career, one of the pillars of the PGI of the Côte d'Azur. It's the end of the day and I remember that I was in my office. Police received the call that told me that shots had been fired at the Larcher Hospital in Nice, on the heights of Nice. Commissioner Frisson immediately went to the scene. In front of the hospital, he discovers a scene of incredible violence. The first thing I see on the spot is this vehicle, an old passenger car, registered in Monaco. I see that the engine is running, that the window on the right-hand side has been broken, that the 4 doors are open. There was a shooting. There was an attempted homicide or a robbery or a carjacking. Finally, it's a criminal thing. 2 people were victims of gunfire. They were evaluated by firefighters in a serious condition. I get in touch with my colleagues from the public security and they immediately tell me that the victim is Mrs. Helene Pastor, a rich Monegasque heiress, and her driver, Mohamed Arouish. Commissioner Frisson is stunned. He did not expect such a discovery. In the car, it is not an unknown, but the very rich heiress of the Pastor Empire. And we just shot him. The 2 victims are still alive, but they are very seriously injured. She has a torn face, the neck crippled with lead. As for Mohamed Arouish, he received the bullets at the level of the thorax. It's the most absolute horror. A few meters from the crime scene, in his hospital room, Gildo, Helene Pastor's son, is one of the first to learn the drama. He can't even go to his mother's bed right away. Everything is shaking in his head. In the middle of the night, he will be expelled from the Larcher Hospital because he no longer feels safe here. In a few hours, the news of this tragedy spreads like wildfire. In the world of yacht owners and rich Monegasques, this incredible crime has a terrible repercussion. It's the effect of a bomb. Because everyone knows who Helene Pastor is in Monaco, of course. It was mainly in Monaco, a real earthquake, it was the cold. Who could blame Helene Pastor? The Pastor case then takes on a national dimension. A shooting in front of a hospital in Nice last night. Helene Pastor, the sister of the former businessman Monegasque, one of the richest families of the Principality, was seriously injured by a bullet, as well as his driver. Prince Albert of Monaco, in particular, said he was very emotional. The reputation of the victims puts pressure on the authorities. The police officers are on the case. The financial weight of this lady, what she represents. We make our case a little out of the ordinary compared to the type of case we are used to dealing with. There were a lot of journalists on the night of the events at the Larcher Hospital. The continuous information channels broadcast live the work we were led to do on the spot. It was particularly followed. Commissioner Frisson begins his investigation. And it starts on wheels. The investigator's luck, the first one, is that there are a lot of witnesses. Since the action takes place in the street, in front of a hospital, at 7 p.m. There were a lot of witnesses, medical students, interns, people who came to see their families. It's an unexpected chance for the police officers. At least 10 witnesses. And they all tell the same story. The shooting is the work of two men they are able to describe. The witnesses describe the two men as being both dressed in black. About 25 to 30 years old, 1.80 meters tall. There is one quite strong, quite square, the other thinner. And these witnesses give a very precise version of what happened. What the witnesses see is the SUV launch a vehicle coming out of the parking lot of the Larkia Hospital. A man approaches it with what is identified as a rifle. So a first individual who shot twice was taken to the vehicle of Mrs. Helene Pasteur and her driver. After shooting, he fled. He was followed, 15 seconds later, by a second individual. Commissioner Frisson is disconcerted by the operating mode. Two men shot in broad daylight, face down, and left on foot. This is unprecedented. And he is not surprised. What surprised us was the ammunition. Because it is not a sniper's ammunition. It is a hunting ammunition, quite banal. Christophe Perrin, a journalist, in Nice this morning. It is rather used for the big game than in accounting regulations. There is a truly amateur side that immediately amazes the investigators. It's true that it doesn't make you think of big crime right away. Nor of accounting regulations in the middle of crime. It makes you think of something not afoot or key, but of amateurs. Amateurs who take on the most wanted family in Monaco. This amazes the police. Perhaps they didn't know the identity of their victims. The first hypothesis is that these criminals must have committed a theft that went wrong. A hypothesis that collapses quickly. The track of the carjacking was quickly removed because Mrs. Pasteur's handbag was not stolen. When someone comes to steal, the first thing is that we think of stealing. We don't think of shooting. Visibly, the shooter had immediately shot at Mrs. Pasteur. The investigators are convinced that the criminals came to kill. It remains to be seen why. But the police will benefit from a serious push. The city of Nice is equipped in video mediums in an extremely sophisticated way. We immediately spot the presence of a camera from the city of Nice. Philippe Frisson, Assistant Director of the Judicial Police of Marseille. He will alternately film the two entrances of the hospital. For the police, these cameras represent an omen. While waiting for them to reveal their secrets, the inspectors look at the life of Helene Pasteur. This personality in view, did she have enemies? Helene, born in March 1937, leads a golden youth with her two brothers and her parents. A privileged life that will be disturbed by her first love. Helene Pasteur is a very beautiful woman who at the age of 18 will have a lover of youth. She will be in love, as we are in love at 19, 20 years old. With a young Polish, a barman, a bit without money, a union that was not very well seen by his father. From this union, his first daughter Sylvia was born. And so his father, who is really the patriarch, the important thing, etc., will do everything. He will do everything for his daughter to give up this love story. And it will be very, very hard for Helene Pasteur, who at the age of 21 will have to separate from her love and her first child's father. Under family pressure, Helene divorces and lives alone with her daughter. 2 years later, she remarries with a dentist this time, of whom she will have a son, Gildo. But this union does not last. Unfortunately, in love, Helene decides to devote her life to managing family affairs. Helene Pasteur likes to do it herself, in fact. She likes to receive her tenants, listen to their complaints, read their emails, change a hot water bottle if necessary, check that everything is going well. Helene Passauer finally responds to the family's request by taking over the reins of the family business and leading a somewhat monastic life. Helene seems to finally fit into the boots that her family asks her to wear. Helene takes care of her business while keeping an eye on the family. Her son Gildo runs an electric car manufacturing company. His daughter Sylwia has been sharing her life for 28 years with Wojciech Janowski, consul of Poland unanimously respected on the Roche. Janowski is a Polish man who arrived in the Principality in the 80s. He met Sylwia at a charity dinner. He had just divorced his second wife. Jean-Jacques Campana, lawyer of Wojciech Janowski. It's the meeting of a man and a woman who, I think, fell in love. For them, it's the beginning of a very long love story since they will stay together for 28 years and they will have a daughter. Janowski and Sylwia display their happiness in the high society of Monegasque, a universe of stress and glitter in which Janowski is perfectly comfortable. He is a businessman. He is an honorary consul of Poland in Monaco. He participates in charitable works. Maureen Mazias, a judicial journalist. He is always very elegant, very well combed. He has a great presence. In society, he imposes it. He speaks several languages. He is a bit seductive. He is someone who has all his place in Monaco. The police did not discover much. Nothing or no one in the entourage of Helene Passauer seems to be able to justify this murder. They then question the witnesses about her personality. Helene Passauer is perceived by her entourage as a woman with a head, a woman with a wrist, who has a temperament that can sometimes be even a little dry. And at the same time, she is a rather fearful woman since when she is at home, she locks herself twice. She hides her jewels and valuables in her trunk, in her apartment. She is a person who has led her whole life in an extremely discreet way. The police are not advanced warriors. They have not found anything in the life of Helene Passauer that could give them a clue about the identity of the killers. They then wonder if they are not going the wrong way and if the real target of the killers was in fact the driver, Mohammed Darwish. But he is still in a coma, so to learn more, the investigators call his son to question him. We ask questions about my father's life, everything I can know. Even rather specific questions, we will say, about the whole life of the family in general. Mohammed Darwish is 54 years old. He has been working for Madame Passauer for about 15 years already. He has been a cook, a driver, basically he is his man of trust. My father, yes, he was one of the faithful people at his service. He was almost all day, from morning to evening, until night, at his service, including the weekend. Mohammed Darwish left his wife and children in Egypt 20 years earlier to come to work in France. But the police discover a surprising element. He has been leading a double life for an eternity. He has a very official wife, but he also has a mistress, just as official. A woman in Egypt and a mistress on the coast of Asia. This double life does not explain this atrocious shooting. The police are disappointed. Their research on Helene Passauer and Mohammed Darwish did not give anything. Not the slightest clue that could explain this execution. But the investigation will know its first rebound. The day after the shooting, fervor reigns in the premises of the Nice Judiciary Police. Investigators have just received the images from the hospital cameras and they are very surprised by what they discover. A real ghetto has been organized. Visual surveillance images will reveal not only the presence of what is called the shooter, but also the presence of a ghetto. One surveillance obviously passes the signal to the other. He will rush in front of the vehicle to shoot from the passenger side. The police now have a clear view of what happened. The massacre is the work of these two men, a ghetto and a shooter. Unfortunately, the videos do not allow to distinguish their faces, but they will reveal a capital information. We can see that the perpetrators arrive in a taxi, which is incredible. Because usually, the murderers arrive either with stolen vehicles or with scooters. They will see the registration plate, they will identify the taxi. And from there, when we contacted the taxi company that had insured the races, they said these two taxis had been reserved for mobile phones. For the police, phones always represent a gold mine. So they rush on this new track. From the taxi's phone, they go back to a phone that was bought in a shop in Marseille. The fact of having activated them on Marseille and not on Nice, it gave us an indication where the perpetrators could come from. Then begins a real work of ants. The police identify the criminal's phone line. And thanks to geolocation, they are able to trace their exact route on the day of the shooting. They then examine one by one the videos of the surveillance cameras and find their traces. At 3:33 p.m., the cameras of the Nice station film the two men as they get off the train. And they reserve an excellent surprise for the commissioner. By an incredible chance, the guys are, as they say, gutted. That is, all of a sudden, they pass in front of a camera and they are in full frame. And there, as they say in the garden, they are beautiful as the sun. It's bingo for the investigators. For the first time, the suspects are recognizable on the videos. Immediately, the police look in their files if they have a trace of these individuals. At the same time, they continue to examine the videos and make a new discovery. The two men go to a hotel called the Azure Hotel in Nice. So, of course, we go there. So we show the photos to the hotel staff. And bingo, the hotel manager perfectly recognizes the two people to whom he rented room 306 and room 206. The investigation is precise. For the first time, the inspectors have faces and a serious track. But still no name. They immediately search the two hotel rooms and they will discover an essential element. There is a shower gel that remained in one of the rooms and the housekeeper, miraculously, did not throw it away. And we will send all this to the laboratory to look for papillary traces and genetic traces. And that's going to be a very important element. An incredible chance. This bottle of shower gel that the housekeeper forgot to throw away surely contains traces of DNA. The police will have to wait to obtain the laboratory results. 4 days have passed since the murder. Helene Pastor is still in intensive care in a serious condition. A few rooms further, Mohammed Darwish, his driver, is still in a coma. On May 10th, his son receives a phone call. It was early in the morning when the doctors called me. He was at home when they told him to come to say goodbye before they took him away. It was a very difficult moment. It was a shock, of course. And above all, the hardest thing for me was to have to call my mother and my sister to warn them and give them the news. Mohammed Darwish died on May 10th without having regained consciousness. In Monaco, it's stupor. The high society knew the driver of the famous billionaire. And everyone wonders why strangers took it from them. A week after this double crime, the motive of this execution remains a mystery for the Monegasques, but also for the investigators. And the death of the driver never deprives them of a key witness that they could not question. Police then focus on the only lead in their possession, the phone of the criminals, which is still active. And the surveillance of the line will eventually bear fruit. On May 15th, the two M10 make a gross mistake that will upset the investigation. During a phone call, a name is pronounced by one of the interlocutors. It is a certain Amadi. a thug already convicted by the justice. The investigations are moving forward and it is not over. The next day, on May 16th, a shot is fired at the police station. The results of the DNA search on the bottle of shower gel have just fallen, and the second perpetrator is identified. And there, we have a stroke of luck that will make us gain a lot of money in the investigation. The DNA found on the shower gel corresponds to someone also well known to the police services called Saeed Ahmed. This time, it's the shooter. The investigators' work paid off. Just 10 days after the shooting, the murderers are identified: Saeed Ahmed and Amadi. And the police did not make a mistake on their part. These are not high-flying criminals. These are little Marseillais who are known for stupefying. Amadi is a 31-year-old young man who lives in the northern neighborhoods of Marseille. He is known for armed theft in the early 2000s. Saeed Ahmed has a pretty close background to Amadi because he is a little younger. He is 24 years old. But he is also of Comorian origin. He is known for stupefying and theft with violence. The identity of the killers is still a mystery. These two little Marseillais do not have the profile of the authors of a crime of such magnitude. Why did they get involved in the murder of this rich heir? The Monégasque Society wonders. And it is not the only one. The police are just as involved. They realize that these two people have nothing to do with Nice. They have no connection with the Nicoise County and even less with Monaco. What connects them to Monaco? Nothing at all. In any case, the police do not find the connection between Monaco and these two little delinquents from Marseille. They are not caters. They are guys who take 6 months, 8 months. They are poor guys, actually. What link between the Pasteur family, these billions of euros, and this very small Marseille delinquency? What is the link? The investigators hold the two criminals, but nothing links them to the Pasteur family. What is their motive? Why did they take the biggest fortune in Monaco? At this stage of the investigation, it is still a mystery. But the investigators will benefit from a new testimony and size. Because, after several days in a coma, Helene Pasteur has just woken up. For the police, it is unexpected. She is their number one witness. They count on her to give them valuable clues. Commandant Messinio moves in to question her. With tears, she will tell me that she enters the car and all of a sudden she sees a black man approaching her, 2 meters away from her. She saw a tube that she thinks is a gun and she immediately says to Mohammed, "Quickly, quickly, we are going to be killed." There is the first shot that breaks the glass and then the second shot. She sees the gun move forward and shoot Mohammed. At the end of this hearing, she confides a little in me by telling me that she is afraid. She is afraid that she will be killed at the hospital and that she has things to tell me. The commandant will not know more. Helene Pasteur is in a respiratory distress and she must interrupt the hearing. A few days later, on May 21st, 2014, Helene Pasteur dies at 77 years old. We learned this morning about the death in Nice and the consequences of Helene Pasteur's injuries. The death of the rich heiress leaves no one indifferent in the principality, and certainly not the prince himself, who quickly published a statement to express his pain. I was shocked because we really thought she was going to make it. It's horrible. On the rock, the whole principality is in mourning. It is a figure from Monaco who has just passed away. One of the symbols of the principality. But it is also a mother of a family who has just disappeared. Her children, Gildo and Sylvia, are annihilated. Both were very close to their mother and the brutality of her death shocked them. There are others that this death concerns. The investigators. After Mohammed Darwish, Helene Pastor, the police have lost their two key witnesses and the investigation seems to be deadlocked. 2 weeks later, the police are still wondering what link unites these Marseillais and the Pastor family. They think that there is a commander and that they did not act on their own. So to try to learn more, they put Saeed Ahmed and Amadi on eavesdropping and they watch them 24 hours a day. We are going to do a big telephony job on these people. Philippe Frisson, Assistant Director of the Judicial Police of Marseille. Erase their detailed invoices and identify as much as possible a mobile phone that they could use before the events, after the events, all that. Here, we upload everything. They call it the fishing rod. That is to say, we let it drift, but we put everything under surveillance to understand the link. The police work tirelessly and they end up finding what they are looking for. After a few weeks of investigation, a name emerges from all these contacts, from all these surveillance. There is a guy who does not look like the others, who aggregates in telephone conversations, but really he is very tenuous. We meet that Amadi is in a relationship with another mobile phone whose name is Pascal Doriac. The investigators immediately learn about his account. They discover that Pascal Doriac is a sports coach for rich families of the Côte d'Azur. And that's not all. By learning about his clientele, they make an incredible Doriac as a coach who gives gym lessons, does massages. He has a clientele in Monaco. This Mr. Doriac presents himself as a sports coach who does sports at home. They work with Mr. Yanofsky and with Sylvia Pastor. So, there is a link that begins to appear between the Principality and the Comorians of Marseille. After 3 weeks of investigation, the police may have found the missing link. His name is Pascal Doriac, 51 years old. And they are not at the end of their surprise. They discover that he is also the gym teacher of Sylvia Pastor, the daughter of Helene and her companion Yanofsky. He has been almost exclusively at their service for 13 years. Over the years, they have become very close. Investigators are convinced that this man is the key to their investigation. The link between the Little Marseillais thugs and the Pastor family. This is really a thunderbolt in the file. It may not be a coincidence that we link the people who participated in the crime to a sports coach who fights the victim's family. We have an intermediary who is essential to the investigation. Between a team of killers and on the other side of the Pastor clan. The investigation moves forward like a giant. Pascal Doriac becomes an important suspect in the Pastor case. To discover what role this sports coach plays in this atrocious crime, the police look at the history of his phone line and some exchanges will intrigue them. Doriac and Yanofsky are in an incessant Yanofsky and Doriac talk to each other. These exchanges of text messages are much more than reasons. There are some suspicious text messages with key dates at the time of the investigation. After the events on May 7th, then at the time of the death of Mohammed Darwish on May 10th, then at the time of the death of Helene Pastor on May 21st. But if we don't have the content of these text messages, it raises questions. The investigators are convinced that this proximity between the two men is suspicious. They focus their efforts on Yanofsky. Could it be that he is involved in the murder of his own mother? To find out, the investigators call the relatives again and they will make an astonishing discovery. The relations between Yanofsky and his mother-in-law are not perfect. She is wary of him and even her brother-in-law, Gillis Dud, is wary of him. He is not necessarily very well accepted in the family. It clearly appeared in the procedure that there was an extremely tense between Yanofsky and his mother-in-law. Helene Pastor has always been very wary of him. Helene Pastor doesn't get along with her son-in-law. She doesn't trust this beautiful speaker, and even worse, she suspects that he frequents her daughter only out of interest. According to her, he would covet the family's heritage. She even hired a private detective to prove it. Patrick Boffin, 30 years of work in the service of many Monegasque families. Mrs. Helene Pastor contacted me, and she had big worries about her son-in-law. Patrick Boffin, private detective, she realized that he was lying. That he was lying about a lot of things, according to her. And she asked me to check all his books. She wanted to try to distance Sylvia from her husband to preserve the interests of her daughter. Having his son-in-law followed by a private detective is not a common thing. And it immediately alerts the police. With the help of the financial brigade, they examine one by one all his professional activities. And they will discover that Yanofsky is not at all the businessman he claims to be. He had lied about a lot of things. About all his profits in England, about his professional situation, about his diplomas. He never set foot in Cambridge. But the worst thing is that his business is going extremely badly. And in fact, all his companies went bankrupt and there was no income. We got rid of the code because it was all for sale. That's it. No, but he deceived everyone. He's a mystifier, he's an imposter. This businessman is in fact indebted to the end. Most of his companies went bankrupt. And the investigators are not at the end of their surprises. They discover that Yanofsky was embezzling the money that Helene was paying every month to her son Sylvia. 500,000 euros. Just like she was giving 500,000 euros to her son Gildo. A phenomenal sum that impresses the police. Sylvia is a pastor. And that's where we go into another world. But her mother gives her for her living 500,000 euros per month. An impressive income that Sylvia manages with her partner. And so Sylvia gives to her husband every month. A white check to pay for the household charges, the boat, the building. Yanofsky is supposed to use this money for the usual expenses, but it seems that he makes a completely different use of it at the beginning of his campaign. In reality, he diverts a lot of this money to his own ends. There are transfers or deposits made with white checks filled by Sylvia, which are deposited either on the personal accounts of Mr. Yanofsky or on accounts in Dubai. The police don't come back. Every month, without his partner knowing it, Yanofsky takes an important part of the 500,000 euros that Helene Pastor gives to his daughter, and the amounts are impressive. He hadn't paid the taxes when she had given him the money to pay the taxes, and in fact he had diverted this money. Sylvia is convinced that they have a very beautiful house in London that she had bought. Besides, she remembers it very well. In reality, the house is mortgaged twice. He told her that the studies of his eldest daughter in the United States cost 500,000 euros, and in fact it only cost 250,000. So he had recovered this money. It's a crazy thing. The police are interlocked. They now know the identity of the killers. Saeed Ahmed, Ahmadi, Doriak, the intermediary, and he suspects Yanofsky to be the killer's agent. But they have no proof, no mobile phone. Why would Yanofsky have wanted to kill his mother-in-law who provided him with a lifeboat? To learn more, he decides to go faster and he launches the interrogations. So in the end, the idea is to gather all these people to have them under our control at some point. Christian Sent, director of the Judicial Police of Paris. And to ask them questions to see if we actually detect a flaw in their version. What happened? We don't know. So we have to at some point Philippe Frisson, assistant director of the Judicial Police of Marseille. To move on to the ultimate step, which is the interpellations, and to pass a warrant for all the Beaumonts. On the Rock, the Monegasques are passionate about this investigation. They are worried about the same question. Who could have taken it at 1 o'clock? For the moment, no information has been leaked. But the truth will soon burst. 6 weeks after the shooting, a sudden blow. The police arrest the killer, Saeed Ahmed, and the gator, Amadi Pascal Doriak, the coach, and of course, Yanofsky and his wife. But they meet a problem. The pastor couple, as a Monegasque, is untouchable by the French police. So to bring them to Nice, the investigators are going to ruse. In order not to arouse the suspicion of Sylvia and Yanofsky, Maureen Mazias, judicial journalist, the investigators summon them as simple witnesses, and once they arrive, they are placed at the police station. The interrogations begin on June 23rd at 7 p.m. The chief first wants to hear Sylvia Pastor. I'm going to go home. I'm not here for nothing. And then I explained to her that no, she will stay with us because there are investigative elements that suggest that her spouse is the commander, and so her world collapses. Sylvia Pastor, she falls out of the closet when she learns that her companion killed her mother. She doesn't believe it. Didier Chalamot, journalist. She defends at first, rightly. She gets angry and says to me, "But Chief, it's not a question that I stay here, him." For her, it's not him, it's not possible, it's not a judge. She refuses to believe that. Sylvia has nothing else to add, and the chief puts an end to her interrogation. The investigators hope to learn more about this with the hearing of Amadi, the gator. And he has solid arguments, videos, and phone recordings. Faced with these irrefutable, the suspect sits at the table. On the other hand, Amadi passes very quickly men. It is difficult for him not to recognize his participation in the facts as long as he is identified by the images from the video surveillance. He will recognize being involved in the murder of Madame Pastor. He will recognize being mounted as a gator. He was approached for a contract. It's about killing an old lady, very rich, and there will be a bonus if we kill the driver. Amadi's confessions astonish everyone. The story is shocking. Doriak, the coach of all the principality, would be the commander of the murder. He would have promised to these little thugs 120,000 euros to kill Helene Pastor and 20,000 euros for the driver. Amadi also confirms that it is Doriak who gave him the orders, but he will bring a capital precision. The sports coach is not the brain of the matter. He will say that above Doriak there is someone who has money, who is on Monaco and who is placed at the higher level. Everything seems designated Yanofsky. But unfortunately for the investigators, Amadi has never met this mysterious commander. The hopes of the investigators are then on Doriak, the sports coach. Will he recognize the facts and deliver Yanofsky? When his custody begins, Doriak seems upset. Very quickly he will explain that he did something horrible, and he becomes aware of it. Catherine Messonneau, head of the repression brigade of the banditry of Nice. He cries very quickly in the office, and he will make circumstantial. Doriak tells everything. He lives as a kind of liberation, or relief. He will give a lot of details. Faced with the Medusa investigators, Doriak admits everything. It is Yanofsky who would have asked him to get rid of his beautiful mother. He says he first refused, but Yanofsky would have insisted. He promised him money, he paid him trips to London, he gave him a beautiful watch, he bought him his car and left it at his disposal. He will even make sure that the campaign of Pascal Doriak can be exposed, since she is a painter in the gallery of the Gildo Sainteur. He had promised him that as soon as it was done, he would become the guardian of the family, he would have a house. He promised him wonders. He says, "That's how I slipped. I slipped in the idea that maybe he had to kill his beautiful mother." Pascal Doriak explains to the police that he ends up feeling indebted, and he agrees to help Yanofsky to liquidate Helene Pastor. He then gives details on the recruitment of Ahmadi and Amin. Obviously, he does not have his entrances in the business. He does not know any thugs, so he needs to recruit killers. Doriak has a brother-in-law who lives in the northern neighborhoods of Marseille, so he decides to talk to him and recruit 2 people likely to fulfill this contract. According to Doriak, Yanofsky thought about everything and explained his plan to him in the smallest detail. Yanofsky thought about it, saying that with the Monaco it is very complicated. There are cameras everywhere. Bring killers. They will be spotted right away. So it was much easier and nice. He will tell Doriak that anyway there was no risk because the French, according to these statements, would never turn to them, and anyway they would not have the necessary money or the means to be able to carry out such a long investigation. The investigators do not come back. Doriak has unfolded the whole story. How was he recruited by the pastor? How did he enroll 2 little thugs to commit the crime? They now have to obtain the confession of the brain of the case. But from the beginning of his hearing, he realizes that the game will be complicated. He has disconnected a little from reality. He did not realize that he was in a police station and that he was in a war of abuse. He behaves like a businessman with us, rather tame but still nice. We have cordial, amazing exchanges, even as if we were in a restaurant or at the Hotel de Paris, exchanging about time, about finance. They asked for drinks, they asked for sodas, they asked for wipes to disinfect their hands, and they pick up the police and say, well, listen, no, frankly, you're wrong. He even tells the investigators how much he is saddened by the death of his mother-in-law, of what happened to his mother-in-law. The policemen turn around. Yanofsky takes them by boat. But Commander Messinio knows the music. After a few hours of this little ride, she decides to put pressure on him. And she has serious assets in hand. The confessions of her accomplices. After a while, we went into the woods. That's when we asked some direct questions, saying that now he was going to stop telling us about salads and that now we knew who had killed Mrs. Helene Pastor and that he was the commander-in-chief. Yanofsky is devastated. Faced with the evidence, he ends up confessing, but from the tip of his tongue. He will tell us that he did not say to kill his mother-in-law, but he said to solve the problem. So we ask him the question again, did you solve the problem? Was it killing your mother-in-law? And he says yes. This businessman recognized illustrious Mrs. Pastor. The whole of Monaco is shocked. As for Sylvia Pastor, she is shocked. She refuses to believe the statements of her companion. The police, who questioned her, allow her to speak to her. Sylvia says to him, "How could you do this to us? How could you do this to the children?" She shouts at him, she unleashes her anger. For Sylvia Pastor, this moment is terrible, since she learns that her companion killed her mother. Didier Chalamot, journalist. So she loses both her daughter's father and her mother. For the police, the investigation is closed. They even have their own hypothesis about Yanofsky's mobile phone. For a few years, Sylvia has been fighting cancer. If she were to die, Yanofsky would not be entitled to any inheritance because they are not married. However, if Helene dies, he will be able to take advantage of the money. Sylvia Pastor had already decided that something was happening to her. It was his daughters that he had to inherit. Yanofsky is not on Sylvia's will. So if Sylvia had just disappeared, he has nothing left. But by suppressing his mother-in-law, he was going to put his hand on the inheritance through Sylvia. A mobile phone that would not hold up, according to his lawyer. When one of Pastor's children marries or lives with someone, Pastor's contract means that this person will never have anything. So who benefits from the crime? And today, at least give me that, it never benefits Wojciech Yanofsky. After 7 weeks of investigation, the mystery of the death of Helene Pastor and her driver, Mohammed Darwish, is solved. A sordid murder, commanded by the beautiful son himself, for a big business. If no charges are held against Sylvia Pastor, Ahmadi, Saeed Ahmed, Doriak, and Yanofsky are put on trial and incarcerated for double murder and organized crime. They risk the prison for life. But while everything seems to have been said, cut to the chase, Yanofsky returns to his statements. He says he would have only confessed under the pressure of the police and to get his wife out of Guernsey. Sylvia had just been a victim of a cancer. She had to undergo a very hard treatment. And in custody, she did not have her medication with her. And there, Yanofsky's face fades away. My wife is still in custody. So I am ready to say everything you want to hear. And that's what he's going to say. To save my wife, I admit to being the commander. The Principality of Monaco is overwhelmed by doubt. Is this Yanofsky, who is part of theirs, so well integrated in the high spheres of Monaco, guilty or innocent? The trial is announcing itself. Will the truth on this case finally burst? On September 17, 2018, for years after the double murder, the trial opens at the Assises de Bouches du Rhône in Aix-en-Provence. To defend Yanofsky, the tenor of the Barreau, Master Eric Dupont-Moretti, nicknamed Acquittator for the number of acquittal records he has obtained. Will he once again succeed in proving the innocence of his client? His strategy? Denounce the conditions of his custody. Yanofsky opens the hostilities by saying, "I am not guilty." His confessions have been extorted. He will say that we mistreated him all along the custody. Catherine Messonneau, head of the repression brigade of the banditry of Nice. According to his terms, we were sleeping in shit, we were eating things that he would never give to his dog. Yanofsky will also claim that we did everything to him except tear off his nails. And that it was the psychological pressure we had put on him during these 4 days that had made him confess in front of us. Master Dupont-Moretti plays the card of confessions extorted thanks to bad treatment. But this tactic will be short-circuited by the president of the court. It causes a real earthquake in the room by projecting a video, the recording of Yanofsky's confessions during his custody. And they have nothing to do with what was said. We see Mr. Yanofsky filmed. He wishes a Coke, which we will get him twice during the hearing. And that he is rather well treated. He covers himself in front of the camera. He will cry, we give him his Kleenex. Henceforth, Eric Dupont-Moretti understands that he can no longer do anything for his client. And he pleads guilty to the death of Helene Pastor. On October 17, 2018, the verdict falls. Ahmadi, Saeed Ahmed, Doriak, and Yanofsky are sentenced to life in prison for the double murder of Helene Pastor and her driver, Mohammed Darwish. A verdict confirmed by appeal in November 2021, except for Doriak, who sees his sentence reduced to 22 years. This crime leaves a family ruined. Wojtek Yanofsky, he has undeniably denied the relations that could exist between Gildo and Sylvia. The family is completely broken. Gildo Pastor confessed that he was torn by this doubt in relation to his sister. And now he lives mainly in the United States. He is very far from his affairs. And this case is very complicated for him. Yanofsky not only killed 2 people, but he leaves behind a family in ruins. This out-of-the-ordinary case is not yet completely over. From his prison, Yanofsky continues to cry out his innocence. And he is expected to be released.